Have you ever asked yourself, why doesn't God show himself? Why doesn't he reveal himself so everyone can see? Why doesn't he reveal himself to me? Perhaps I'm going to help you see in this video some things you may not have thought before. So in this short video, we'll look at that question. Okay, let's talk about this. Let's go some places in Scripture and do some thinking, because perhaps there's a different way of looking at this than the way you're looking at it right now. When Peter is preaching to Cornelius and his household in Acts chapter 10, he says this in his message. He says, "And Jesus rose from the dead, but did not show himself to everyone, but revealed himself to a select few witnesses, who would then be able to go out and say he's risen from the dead." So that's telling us it's a very deliberate choice of Jesus. Why? I mean, in today's culture with Facebook and Instagram, you announce who you are. You announce what you're doing. We have an understanding of fame and how it works. Yet Jesus is going against that. It's like he's hiding in a corner, telling a few, and then they have to go out, which makes them vulnerable to people saying, well, if he's real, why doesn't he come and show himself to me? Why does he have to send you? Why? In 1 Corinthians chapter 2, Paul might begin to give us an answer to that question when he talks about the wisdom of God. Now, wisdom is an extraordinary thing. I have what I think is my wisdom, but it seems like God's wisdom is totally different, is totally other. Paul talks about how the whole idea of God coming in flesh, Jesus Christ, living life with us, then dying our death and rising from the dead, is God's way of breaking in and setting us free from the trap we find ourselves in our own self-focused heart. Now that message, he says, the intelligent people of the time, the Greek philosophers, couldn't understand it. It doesn't make sense. How can someone die for everyone else? Why would God step down and do that? Others, the religious people of the day, were waiting for the Messiah to come as a hero warrior that would set up a kingdom, that would overthrow the Romans and establish a new Davidic kingdom, and they'd win because God was on their side. He doesn't do that. The wisdom of God means that God humbles himself, comes down in an almost secret, hidden way to a poor family, to living in a quite an insignificant city, and then dying. And after he dies, because he's done the wisdom of God and walked in that, the Father rises him from the dead. But even then, he doesn't tell everyone. This wisdom is different. It's not what I would choose. And so when we're asking the question, why doesn't God show up? I can be expecting God to do what I think is best. But it seems he, in love and wisdom, is saying there's a much better way. Now let's think about Moses when he sees the burning bush and turns aside to hear God. He's walking in the wilderness looking after his sheep, and he sees a bush on fire, not an uncommon thing in the wilderness. But what is uncommon is he notices it's not being consumed. It's still burning on and on and on. So he turns to look at this spectacle to see what's going on here. Now I think there's a clue here as to how God works. Because again, God doesn't just stand in front of Moses and go, "Here I am." He waits for him to turn aside and look at something, to show a hunger, to show a humility, to be prepared to look at something that doesn't make sense to him. Now that causes Moses to start to interact with God on a whole nother level. Certainly, hunger is important. It's like God is in front of us, but he does things on the edge of our vision, so we have to turn aside and look. Hunger and humility. And then there's one final story I want to draw us to, and that is when Thomas doubts that Jesus has risen from the dead. And he tells all the disciples, all the followers of Jesus who he's with, I won't believe unless I see him. And then eventually the day comes where Jesus walks into the room with the disciples and Thomas is there. And Thomas falls on his face and goes, my God and my King. And Jesus says, Thomas, you believe because you've seen. Blessed, blissed, supernaturally happy are those who believe who have not seen. Jesus is not saying Thomas has failed by asking to physically see Jesus. He's saying there's something deeper here. There are many coming who will not have seen me, and their believing in me, though they've not seen me, will cause something supernatural to happen within them. That means they are blessed, they are blissed, an extraordinary encounter on the inside. And it seems that how God has chosen to work is to reveal himself on the edges of our vision so that we turn to him, prepared to see a God that we're not expecting. And then that act of turning in hunger and encountering in an inner way the resurrected Christ causes an explosion of blessed bliss within us, because we know he's there and real, though we have not physically seen him. It's unexplainable, but it makes sense to those who might be reaching out for the wisdom of God that is different from our wisdom. May you encounter God inside in his wise way of revealing himself.